My sister took my 7-year-old daughter's visual aid glasses, crushed them under her foot to teach her respect. Then she forced my visually impaired child to re-clean the same kitchen over and over while everyone watched. I didn't shout. I took action. 9 hours later, their lives started to unravel. It was supposed to be normal. That's always how it starts, isn't it? A plan that looks harmless on paper. A family visit. A holiday weekend. A quick drop-off so I can work my shift without juggling childcare like a circus act. I'm a doctor. I'm used to emergencies. I'm used to blood, bile, and the kind of screaming you can't fix with Tylenol. What I'm not used to is walking into a living room full of my own relatives and feeling, instantly, like I just stepped into a room where something died. Not literally, not yet, but something. I pulled into my parents' driveway with that particular kind of exhaustion that feels like it's living in your bones. My coffee had worn off 3 hours ago. The only thing keeping me upright was the thought of getting my daughter Grace home, getting her into pajamas, and letting my brain shut down like an old laptop. I opened the front door expecting noise and chaos. The normal grandma's house soundtrack. Cartoons blaring, kids running, someone yelling about juice. Instead, the house felt staged, like the air had been wiped down. Mom was at the counter, stacking plates. Dad was in his chair like he'd been glued there. My sister Lauren was on the couch with her phone in hand, looking relaxed in a way that felt performative. And Grace? Grace was sitting on the rug, tiny and still, hands in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. She didn't look up when I walked in. That hit me first. My kid is not dramatic. She doesn't perform emotions. She doesn't throw tantrums. When she's upset, she goes quiet. She turns inward. And right now she looked folded, small, tense, like she was trying to take up less space. Then I saw her hands, not mangled, not bleeding, just wrong. Red around the knuckles, a little bruised in a way that made my stomach tighten. The kind of bruising you get when you scrub something too long, too hard, with a child's soft skin. She also wasn't wearing her glasses. Grace wears visual aid glasses. She's worn them long enough that putting them on is as automatic as breathing. Without them, she squints and gets headaches. With them, she's just Grace. Book-obsessed, quietly funny, always watching the world like it's a puzzle she's trying to solve. So when I saw her face bare, eyes slightly unfocused, I stopped in the doorway. "Hey, baby," I said, keeping my voice casual, like nothing in my chest had just shifted. "Where are your glasses?" Grace flinched. Not a dramatic jump, just a tiny inward twitch, like my question was a tripwire. Lauren answered before Grace could. She dropped them. Her tone was smooth. Too smooth. The way you speak when you've rehearsed something and you're waiting to see if anyone challenges you. I took a step closer. "Dropped them where?" Lauren shrugged, eyes still on her screen. "Somewhere. Earlier." Mom didn't look up from her plates. "It's not a big deal, Erin." That was the second hit. When your child is 7 and something is not a big deal to the adults, it usually means it should be. I crouched in front of Grace. "Sweetheart, where are they?" Grace stared at the carpet. "I dropped them," she whispered. Her voice sounded like she was reading off cue cards. Lauren let out a short laugh. "She's been pushing boundaries today." I looked up. "What kind of boundaries?" Lauren finally raised her eyes from her phone. "Oh, you know, touching things she shouldn't. Not listening. Acting entitled." Mom slid a plate into the sink a little harder than necessary. "Kids need to learn." Dad turned a page in his newspaper like he was trying to disappear into it. Grace's shoulders stayed hunched. She kept her hands tucked tight in her lap, like she didn't trust them. Across the room, Lucas, Lauren's son, made an exaggerated squinting face and whispered something to Chloe and Madison, his two sisters. They giggled. Not loud enough to get in trouble. Just loud enough for Grace to hear. That's the kind of cruelty that always lands. Not a punch, not a scream. A quiet laugh that says, "We can do this right in front of you." I held my expression steady. I've learned how to do that in exam rooms and trauma bays. When you panic, people panic harder, so you don't. You become calm like it's a weapon. "Okay," I said. "Can I see them?" Lauren stood up, walked over to the side table, and picked up a little pile of something. She dropped it into my hand like she was giving me a receipt. Grace's broken glasses. The frame was bent. One lens had a crack that ran like lightning through the plastic. The hinge was twisted in a way that didn't look like gravity did it. Mom glanced at them and shrugged. "We'll figure it out." The cousins made another whispery noise. Grace didn't look up. I swallowed whatever was rising in my throat. "We're leaving." Mom finally looked at me. "Erin, I'm leaving," I repeated, still calm. Lauren lifted her chin. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't respond. I took Grace's backpack with my free hand and held out the other. Grace stood slowly, like she was afraid movement would be punished. Her hand slid into mine. Cold fingers. Stiff. We walked out. In the car, Grace stared out the window and said nothing. I didn't push. Not yet. I got us home, took her inside, and immediately pulled out the backup pair of glasses from her drawer. Because of course she has a backup pair. I'm not a monster. I'm a single mom with a child who needs to see. We have backups for everything. I have backups for my backups. I have backups for my faith in humanity, and even those are running low. Grace put them on, and her shoulders dropped a fraction, like her brain could finally stop straining. Physically, she was safer. Emotionally, she looked like she was still sitting on that rug, listening to her cousins laugh. I checked her hands in the kitchen light. The redness around her knuckles was clearer now. There were faint bruises, too. Nothing huge, but enough to make me want to drive back over there and rearrange the furniture with my bare hands. "Did you fall?" I asked softly. Grace shook her head. "Did you hurt your hands doing something?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away. "No." Cue cards again. I didn't press. I made dinner, mac and cheese, because I wasn't emotionally stable enough for vegetables. Grace barely ate. Later, after her bath, after pajamas, after I brushed her hair and pretended like my heart wasn't running laps inside my ribs, I sat on the edge of her bed. "Hey," I said, "can you tell me what happened today? The real version." Grace's mouth tightened. She stared at the blanket like it might give her instructions. I kept my voice light. "You're not in trouble. I'm not mad at you. I just need to understand." Silence. Then, I did something bad." My stomach dropped. "No, you did something that made them mad. That doesn't mean you did something bad." Grace swallowed. Her voice came out in fragments, like she was stepping around landmines. "I thought Aunt Lauren was watching a video. On her phone." "Okay." So I looked. Just for a second. "Okay." And she got really mad. Like, really mad. Grace's fingers twisted the edge of her blanket. She said I was disrespectful. And she said I had to learn respect. My hands went still in my lap. And then she took my glasses. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. "She threw them down," Grace whispered. "And she stepped on them. Like hard." Grace's voice cracked. "I told her I couldn't see. She said I should have thought about that." My brain tried to stay calm. My body tried to become fire. Grace kept going, quieter. Then she made me clean the kitchen. And I did, but she said it wasn't good enough. So I had to do it again. My eyes flicked to her hands. Again and again, Grace said. My hands hurt. And Lucas and Chloe and Madison were laughing and... Grandma watched. And Grandpa? I asked. Grace shrugged, tiny. He was there. The kind of answer that means he didn't stop it. Grace's voice turned smaller. I tried to be good. I tried really hard. I felt something inside me crack and stay cracked. Grace blinked rapidly. Mom, am I bad? I leaned forward and held her face gently between my hands. No! But, no, I repeated. You are not bad. What happened to you was bad. That's not the same thing. She started crying then, quietly, like she didn't want to get in trouble for taking up space. I held her until her breathing slowed. When she finally drifted toward sleep, I reached for my phone and opened the camera roll. I photographed the broken glasses from every angle. Then I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the crushed frame like it was a crime scene. I didn't shout. I didn't call Lauren back. Not yet. I took a deep breath, the kind you take before you walk into an operating room. And I started making plans, because 9 hours after I found out what they did to my child, their lives started to unravel. People don't wake up one morning and decide to become cruel. They practice. They sharpen it like a skill. They wrap it in polite words. They teach it to their kids like it's manners. In my house growing up, Mom called it strict. Strict meant if you spilled milk, you got a lecture long enough to qualify as a college course. Strict meant if you spoke with attitude, you learned what fear tasted like. Dad didn't hit. Dad didn't yell. Dad perfected the art of being physically present while spiritually checked out. He sat in his chair, sighed when Mom got loud, and acted like silence was neutrality instead of consent. Lauren figured out early how to survive in that ecosystem. Smile at the right moments. Say, yes, ma'am. Become the good kid. And once she did, the lightning stopped hitting her. It hit me instead. That's how families like this work. They don't change. They just pick a target. By the time I was a teenager, I could read footsteps like weather. Fast steps meant rage. Slow steps meant lectures. Silence meant something worse was coming. Lauren learned to use it. If she broke something, she'd cry first. If she got caught, she'd gasp like she'd been betrayed. Mom would swoop in, comfort her, then turn toward me like I'd committed a felony. I don't know when exactly I stopped expecting fairness. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was more like erosion. One tiny injustice at a time until you just accept the shape of your life. I became a doctor because it was the first place rules made sense. In medicine, there are still unfair things. People get sick for no reason. Children suffer. Bad things happen to good families. But at least the rules are real. Cause and effect exist. If you treat pneumonia, the lungs improve. If you stitch a cut, the bleeding stops. At home, cause and effect were negotiable. I kept contact with my parents because that's what you do when you've been trained to feel guilty for breathing. And because when Grace was born, I looked at her and felt something I'd never felt as a kid. Protective love. The kind that makes you want to build her a world where she's safe. So I tried. I tried to give her grandparents, cousins, an aunt. I told myself it would be different with her. It wasn't. It was subtler at first. Little things. Lauren's kids, Lucas, Chloe, and Madison, were treated like the main characters. They got the first slice of cake, the biggest gifts, the loudest praise. Grace got smiles that felt like charity. Sometimes Lauren would say things like, "Grace is so sensitive," and Mom would laugh like that was a personality flaw instead of a warning sign. Sometimes Lucas would mock her quietly, and Chloe and Madison would giggle, and the adults would pretend they didn't hear. Sometimes I'd catch Grace watching them, shoulders slightly hunched, like she was trying to figure out what rule she'd missed. And the worst part? Sometimes I told myself it was normal sibling cousin stuff, because denial is cheaper than truth. I also helped them financially, not because I'm some saint, but because it was a way to buy peace. Mom and Dad had expenses. Lauren had gaps. There were fees, activities, little emergencies that somehow always landed in my lap. I covered things here and there, a bill, a camp fee, a uniform, we're short this month. Some of that occasional help went toward Lauren's kids, activities, fees, little gaps I filled, while Grace still got treated like she should be grateful just to be included. It was the family version of rent, pay to stay tolerated. And then there was Raymond Whitman, Uncle Ray. Technically, he was my uncle, maybe great-uncle, depending on how you count family trees. To Grace, he was just Uncle Ray, because he was the only one who made her feel like she wasn't taking up too much space. He remembered her birthday. He asked about her books. He spoke to her like she was a person, not a small inconvenience. When he died recently, I grieved hard. Not loudly, not theatrically, just the quiet grief of realizing the one decent adult in your extended family is gone. After Ray's death, family gatherings felt tense in a way I couldn't name. Not because anyone said anything, because people stopped making eye contact, because conversations ended when I walked into rooms, because something had shifted under the surface and nobody was going to tell me what it was. I told myself it was grief, stress, everyone coping differently. I told myself a lot of things, and then Lauren crushed my daughter's glasses under her foot and called it respect. And suddenly, my brain stopped accepting lies as comfort. I didn't wake up the next morning angry. I woke up cold. There's a difference. Anger is loud. It wants to fight. It wants to be seen. Cold is quiet. It wants to finish things. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table in her backup glasses, tracing circles on her placemat like she was trying to erase herself. She looked up when I walked in, and her eyes did that thing children do when they're waiting for punishment they don't deserve. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You're not in trouble. Okay?" She nodded, but her shoulders stayed tight. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I didn't do it dramatically. I didn't slam keys or mutter revenge speeches. I simply stopped paying. One by one, I canceled everything. The recurring help, the little transfers, the automatic payments that had become background noise in my life, the support I'd been providing to Mom and Dad, the occasional coverage for Lauren, the fees that weren't my responsibility but had been my reality. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Each click felt like taking my own oxygen back. Then I wrote one message. 1. Family group chat. No caps, no paragraphs of emotion. Just facts. Lauren destroyed Grace's glasses. The cost to replace them is $800. I expect reimbursement. Effective immediately, you will not have access to Grace. Do not contact her. Do not come to my home. I hit send, and then I waited. Not for a reply, for Grace. Because what happened didn't just break plastic. It broke something inside her. After breakfast, Grace lingered near the doorway of the living room like she didn't know where she was allowed to exist. "Mom?" she asked. "Yeah?" Her voice was small. "Why was Aunt Lauren so mad at me?" I sat on the couch and patted the cushion beside me. Grace sat carefully, like the couch belonged to someone else. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But you didn't deserve what she did." Grace stared at her hands. The faint bruising on her knuckles was still there, like a quiet signature of what happened. I didn't even... I didn't even do anything, she whispered, and her voice wobbled in that way that makes you want to break the universe in half for hurting your kid. I kept my tone calm. Tell me what you remember. Grace hesitated. It was stupid. Okay. I thought she was watching a video, like TikTok. I nodded. Kids are kids. Curiosity is not a crime. And when I looked, Grace said, brow furrowing, it wasn't even interesting. It was boring, like grown-up stuff. What kind of grown-up stuff? She scrunched her face like she was trying to pull the memory out of fog. Like an email. I didn't read it. I just saw words. Any words you remember? Grace shook her head, then paused. There was a word, like trust? I don't know what that is. My coffee stopped tasting like coffee. Grace kept going, unaware she'd just dropped a grenade into my lap. And I saw Uncle Ray's name, she added, still focused on how unimportant it seemed. Just for a second, I didn't even want to read it. Aunt Lauren just got mad right away. She shrugged, like the most confusing part was that her aunt had overreacted to something boring. I kept my face neutral through sheer willpower. Okay, I said softly. Thank you for telling me. Grace's eyes flicked up. Am I in trouble? No, I said, and this time my voice didn't shake. You're safe. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath since yesterday. I hugged her, held her longer than usual, not because she needed it, though she did, but because I needed the reminder that she was here, with me, and not on someone else's floor scrubbing until her hands bruised. Then my phone rang. Lauren. Mom and Dad were on speaker within 10 seconds, like this was a coordinated emergency. Lauren didn't even bother with hello. What is this message? Mom's voice cut in, sharp. Aaron, what are you doing? I kept my voice flat. I'm done. Lauren scoffed. Done with what? Your tantrum? You destroyed Grace's glasses, I said. You're paying for them, and you're not seeing her. Lauren snapped too fast. That's not what happened. Mom chimed in immediately, like she'd been waiting for her cue. She dropped them. And you're canceling payments? Lauren added, like that was the real crime. Are you serious right now? Dad said nothing. Of course. Lauren's denial came out sloppy, tangled with justifications she couldn't help herself from adding. We didn't destroy anything, she said, and then immediately, she was being disrespectful. She needed consequences. So which is it? A tragic accident or a punishment? Pick a lie and commit, Lauren. This is amateur hour. I didn't argue. I'm not paying for you anymore, I said. And you're not touching my child. Mom's voice rose. You're tearing the family apart. No, I said calmly. You did that when you stood there and watched. There was a beat of silence, and in that silence I heard something I'd never heard from them before. Fear, because the leash had snapped. Lauren hissed, You can't do this. I almost laughed. The entitlement was impressive. I already did, I said. Don't call Grace. Don't come here. Pay for the glasses. And then I ended the call, not because I'd won an argument, because I wasn't having one. Grace peeked around the corner. Was that Aunt Lauren? I forced my voice gentle again. Yeah. Grace's eyes filled. Is she mad? Let her be mad, I said. That's not your job to fix. That night, after Grace fell asleep, I sat at my laptop again. Not my bank account this time. I searched. Raymond Whitman. Obituary. Law firm. Probate. The kind of boring grown-up words Grace had dismissed as nothing. And for the first time, the question in my head wasn't why did she do this? It was, What were they hiding that made her do this? The lawyer's office smelled like coffee that had given up on life. Michael Harris was calm in the way only people who deal with paperwork disasters can be. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen families implode over less than a toaster. I told him the short version, the useful version, Grace's glasses, the crushing, the forced cleaning, the respect fixation, the phone, the word trust. Raymond Whitman's name on an email. Michael didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, like a man checking boxes in his head. "You want to know if there was a trust," he said. "I want to know why my sister reacted like my 7-year-old committed espionage," I replied. Michael's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair." He asked for names, dates, relationship lines. Mom and Dad's names too, because legal documents don't care that I call them Mom and Dad. He didn't promise miracles. He promised process. And then, because life likes to punch you in patterns, we fast forward. Not because nothing happened, because it was mostly emails, calls, and waiting. The kind of waiting that makes your skin itch. When Michael called me back, his voice had changed. Not panicked, not dramatic, just heavier. "There is a trust," he said. My stomach dropped anyway. "Tied to Raymond Whitman," he continued. "Your daughter is listed as a beneficiary." I held the phone tighter. "How much?" Michael paused, like he was letting the number land properly. $240,000, he said. "Owed to your daughter. Withheld." I sat down so fast I nearly missed the chair. My daughter, Grace, $240,000. And it wasn't lost. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't paperwork delayed in the mail. Michael's next sentence was the one that turned my cold into something sharper. "Your parents are named as trustees," he said, "and there's no record of a distribution to your branch." My mouth went dry. "So they just kept it." Michael exhaled. "Based on what I can see, yes." For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, because all the words were violent. Michael continued, professional. "We can pursue this formally, demand an accounting, file in court, seek removal of trustees, seek recovery." "And criminal?" I asked quietly. Michael paused again. "If funds were intentionally withheld or misappropriated, you can file a police report for theft or fraud. That's separate from the civil process. But yes." My voice came out flat. "Do it!" Michael didn't argue. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "All right." So we moved. We filed what we needed to file. We demanded what we needed to demand. We put everything in writing so nobody could misremember later. And yes, I went to the police. Not for the glasses, not for the kitchen, for the theft. For the fact that adults who called themselves my family had looked at my daughter's future and decided it belonged to someone else. The report itself was the most surreal part. Sitting in a chair under fluorescent lights, explaining that my parents had withheld $240,000 owed to my child. The officer's eyebrows climbed higher with every sentence. "Your parents were trustees?" he repeated. "Yes." "And you only found out because my 7-year-old glanced at my sister's phone," I said. And my sister responded by crushing her glasses under her foot. He stared at me for a beat. Then he said slowly, "Okay." That was it. No grand speech. Just the quiet click of a pen and the sound of consequences becoming real. Once the official notices went out, the silence broke. Not with calls, with a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Mom holding a plate. "Cookies, because nothing says please don't involve the legal system like baked goods." Dad was behind her, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Lauren stood off to the side, arms crossed, wearing a smile so tight it could have cut glass. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mom's voice was sweet. Too sweet. "Erin, honey, we just want to talk." Lauren lifted the cookie plate slightly, as if sugar could rewrite history. I looked at the cookies. "Interesting timing." Mom blinked innocently. "We don't know what you mean." I did smile then. I couldn't help it. Dry humor is sometimes the only thing holding me upright. "Sure," I said. "Just like you don't know what happened to Grace's glasses." Mom's sweetness flickered. Lauren stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything up over nothing." "Over nothing," I repeated. $240,000 is nothing now?" Dad finally spoke, quietly. "Erin." I held up a hand. "Talk to Michael Harris." Mom's face tightened. "We're family." "I noticed," I said. "That's the problem." Lauren's smile cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I understand," I said. "For the first time in my life, I understand perfectly." Mom's voice got sharper. "You're humiliating us." "That's funny," I said. "Because Grace's hands were bruised from scrubbing while you watched." Lauren snapped, loud now. "She shouldn't have looked at my phone." And there it was. Not a denial. A justification. A confession wearing manners. Mom hissed, "Lauren, stop!" But Lauren was already spiraling because guilt makes people stupid. "She was disrespectful," Lauren spat. "She needed to learn. And now you're trying to steal from our kids." I laughed once, short and cold. "From your kids." Mom stepped forward, eyes flashing. "Do you have any idea how unfair this is?" I tilted my head. "Tell me." Mom's mouth tightened, and then she said it. The thing they'd been choking on since Raymond Whitman died. "It's unfair," she snapped, "that Grace would get so much more than the other grandchildren." Lauren jumped in like she'd been waiting for permission. "She's an only child. She gets everything. Meanwhile, my kids—" "And there it is," I said softly. "The motive. The reason. They weren't protecting Grace. They were protecting their own math." Mom's face went pale as she realized what she'd admitted. Dad looked down at the porch like it might swallow him. Lauren glared at me. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said. "I am." I stepped back. "Talk to Michael." Mom's voice rose, desperate now. "Erin, don't do this." I looked at her, really looked, and felt something quiet settle inside me. "You did this," I said, "when you decided my daughter's future belonged to someone else." Then I shut the door. Not dramatically, just finished. Time passed the way it does when lawyers get involved, in documents, deadlines, and the occasional email that makes your heart punch your ribs. Grace stayed in her backup glasses while we replaced the destroyed pair. Her hands healed. The bruising faded. The quiet apology reflex took longer, but it did fade. The trust matter resolved. Grace's $240,000 was recovered and secured properly, with safeguards that didn't involve my parents' signatures. Mom and Dad were removed as trustees, because trustee is a job title, not a birthright. Criminal charges landed too. No prison, this wasn't a movie, but enough to sting in all the right places. Probation, fines, and community service. The kind of community service that comes with a fluorescent vest and people you know walking past pretending not to stare. And yes, the wider family found out. Secrets don't survive court filings. Invitations dried up. Phone calls slowed. The people who'd once nodded along to respect and discipline suddenly got busy. Funny how morality shows up once there's paperwork. Lauren's life shrank. Mom's social circle did that quiet, evaporating thing. Dad stayed quiet, as always. Silence isn't innocence, but it is consistent. As for us, we stayed no contact. Grace stopped apologizing every time she took up space. One night, months later, she asked me, "Mom, are we okay now?" I thought about the bruised hands, the crushed glasses, the cookies on the porch, the word trust that changed everything. And I said, honestly, yeah, we're okay. Because peace isn't the absence of noise. Sometimes it's the sound of a door closing and staying closed. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe.